This is Kelly Borsheim again. Thank you for watching. I'm going to continue working on this painting Lollipop. I hope you watch the 3 videos on the drawing part and the design of the piece. And we're going to continue now with the painting. So I had a little life thing happen to me just a minute ago, and as I got all set up to do everything, I went to check out the camera, and my point and shoot that I've been using to shoot videos says to me, I'm done, like finally done, and I'm not coming back. So as I work towards trying to get a new point and shoot camera for doing videos, I ended up having to scramble because now mentally I really want to start this painting, and I don't want something crazy like not having a camera to stop me from doing what I want to do. So I decided to rig up this iPhone that I have, and thank you, Peggy, for that gift. A lot of painters like to do color studies. It's a really good idea because you don't invest all of your time in here making mud and stuff. It's always good to plan ahead with stuff. I tend to not have patience with that, and I want to often get right into it, but really most of the thing goes on in my head. However, it's easy for me to say that, but it's not always a good idea because what's in your head doesn't necessarily manifest itself in real life. So it's good to have a plan, and it's good to kind of know what you want to do with stuff, especially in this case. I mentioned to you, I want to try to make this painting more like Sorolla, and that for me is a very different thing because I really enjoy high contrast paintings with the lights and the darks and that sort of thing. So I did these 2 sketches here, and don't mind the IKEA, or I guess in the States it'd be IKEA, paper. It's just, this is a sheet of paper inside of a frame, and I like the solid gray so that I didn't have to add the middle tone. So here you can see I've done 2 drawings. They're not proportionally to scale or anything like that. I wasn't as concerned about that, except I'm more interested in what is the general relationship of all the colors and the tones mostly to themselves. So here you can see I've made one with very few darks in it, and I've got just, you know, a reddish kind of color for the shadow of the skin tones. I added the white for the highlights of the skin tone because really he's going to be my subject, the little boy. And so I want to make the lightest lights will be something on him in this case. The foliage in the foreground on this side actually was in the dark, and so it's a little bit bluer green and stuff with that. So I'm playing with colder greens here. And then this branch, which I can't remember is a different tree or not, but it's in the sun, and it's getting a lot more light and warmth in there. So I'm just messing with this, using the gray as the basic background for water and the rock color and that sort of thing, and then adding these in. Because again, the point of doing this is to get something quick so that you see what you want to do and learn where you want to go and what you prefer. After I did that, I did this drawing here, which is more my typical thing that I do with the high contrast. And I have to say I'm a little bit biased towards that. But I want you to note also that it's a very simplistic color tone with a cold dark green, blues, which is, you know, almost the same family kind of thing, and then you have skin tones, and then you have gray and white rocks, and then more watercolor, which is more the blue, which balances it out. And that's a nice thing. It's not necessarily that I don't like it. You'll note that I didn't even put the plants in here because I was not sure what I wanted to do with it, but also some part of me wondered what would the composition look like if I leave certain things out. Because in my sketch on the canvas I left a few things out too, because I wanted to emphasize this curve of the rock as I spoke about before, and against the curve of his body. So I'm doing more circles in this time, with the lollipop, the subject being an off-centered circle and quite small. So I designed these leaves and stuff just to refresh in case you didn't watch this drawing. Some of these are going to be rounded in shape as I try to play off the fact that I'm painting on a round maple panel that I want to see with. So you can see the triangular designs of the stone. Okay, so I'm repeating yourself. Please, I do encourage you to look at the first 3 videos of the drawing itself. So I don't know if I should explain or not, but the reason that I'm too high up is because this is a display easel that John Borsheim had built for me many, many years ago when I had a bas-relief called Shield. And so he made this for an outdoor exhibit that we had, and I recently have it. It's a very strong easel, and I decided in this case to use this during the winter while I was working in my bedroom, which is very a small space to have as a studio, because usually I like to stand back and look at things, and this will be kind of an interesting trick. But okay, so let me get started on this. I also decided that I went through the paints that I have, and I have the good fortune that a lot of friends tend to leave me with paints or art supplies of all kinds, and even clothes and whatever, so when they leave Italy. And some of these things I've actually gotten from the States from many years ago. I used to go buy out places when they were going out of business or whatever. So I have a tube here of Gamblin Flake White Replacement, and I used it or the artist before me used some of this here, but I'm going to try it because in Florence, Italy, a lot of the art students, my friends, all swear to lead white paint. I'm not really crazy about putting in lead white paint because I was in the kid generation where they were trying to remove all that from the walls. So I decided I didn't really want to do that. Plus, at some point, I had a flatmate, studio flatmate, who wanted to make his own paint because that's what they do in Florence. The kids will take the powder and grind it themselves and make their own tubes and everything. Only my studio flatmate wanted to do that in the studio. And the problem with that was, in that case, that was actually in my home. So I didn't really like the safety of that. Neither did my boyfriend too much. But the point is that I want to try this as a flake white replacement because I tend to be really curious about everything. And so many people say you have to do it one way, you have to do it only this way, and nothing else will do. And I just don't really buy into that because individuals work in different ways, and we find that different things make us happy and work with our brains, and also it's a matter of taste, but it's also a matter of safety and security. And so, you know, we can go round and round. The cadmiums are also known to be dangerous, so it's an interesting thing of why choose one or the if you're going to use all of them. Okay, so this is an old thing, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's not going to open so much because it's got all this paint crusted around it. Now, a lot of times young artists will say, well, let me just twist this and get my pliers out and all this. The problem is that if this is really stuck hard, this is actually I guess you could call it a chemical seal, because what it is, it's hardened oil, and it's stuck there at the room temperature now. So temperature is everything, which you learn in wax sculpture and frankly a lot of things. Temperature, 1 little degree can make a whole difference. So what I'm going to do with this is my favorite trick, because I like to paint with candles. I showed you this probably in another video, maybe the painting Castelvecchio ones. But I like the candles because they're romantic and they're fun, but also they're practical, because if I grab a tube and I can't open it, I just like to run this over it. I'm not getting down into it because that will just melt the plastic and that's going to destroy everything I'm trying to go for. But I want to run it over lightly. Do you remember as a child taking your little finger? I mean, we all sort of did this as a dare project, and we would run our finger like this over the flame until we finally got a little black kind of bar there. You know, it was always a thing of how low can you go? But it's this same kind of idea. I find with a lot of the paint tubes, I don't need to do this a lot, and I can twist, and then it just comes right off. And once you get it going, usually it's going to keep on going, because in general, depending on how you paint and how you decide to take care of your things, I find that it's only at the outermost edges where it's stuck. So I'm going to go ahead and unstick any of these that might otherwise be stuck, and I'm going to put my palette all together, and then I'll show you that and we'll start up again. So bear with me a moment, please. Thanks for watching. Borsheimarts.com. Oh, I do want to say I am going to move the candle because this setup was just designed so that I would have it in the scene and remember to tell you about this little painting trick. But this is a dangerous setup here, and you shouldn't be doing it. So I'm going to move the candle off out of the camera way where I can still have my romantic fire to make me happy. And then I have something safe to work with where I don't have to worry about bending over and having my hair fall in it, or having my picture fall off into the flame, which I actually did once, and my landlady kind of was shocked, and then she was amused. But getting sidetracked. See you in a bit. Hi. So I'm back again, and what I have done is I'm using a very small palette because I'm going to work on a limited palette in just the water today, and I don't like to clean palettes. So here it is. I've got white here, and then I've got a green. Now I'm going to put this up close. Can you see that this pigment is the only one that actually has white mixed in it? That I've sort of taken my finger and jab it because, and again, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to use a palette knife or something that's not going to hurt your skin and get into your bloodstream. So, oops, that's not pretty. Oh, so the heavy paint doesn't want to do the vertical thing, huh? All right, so, yoy. Here, let me do it this way. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the difference in this, but this green has white in it. This is a warm green, a cold green, and a colder green than not. Oops, I'm getting the little drippy effect. I don't know what the name of the artist is who does that. But okay, you can see though that the blues are transparent. This is a olive green, I believe, and this one is the green umber. And they're darker colors, but they're still transparent. So this will be transparent. Do you see how I thinned it up? If you make it thin enough, of course it'll be transparent, but it doesn't have the same qualities these other ones. But I'm fine with that. That just happened to be what I have in my studio at the moment, and I'm going to go play with these and see what happens. I tend to mix things on the board a little bit, although I will mix them around up here when I need to. So let's go ahead and get started and see what's going to happen. Now, I will say that most painters, or maybe a lot of them, tend to put their, little thumb through the hole and all this and work. And if you're right-handed, you would put this for left-handed. If you're lefty, it would be the other way around. The problem for me is, one, I tend to want to work with both hands. Not always, but I want to be able to, if I need to get a line done this way, or like in this, the curve here, for me, my right hand, this is awkward for me to paint this way. And when I do that, I will just rather take a left hand paintbrush and go with the flow of the left hand. So, and I find that maybe it's a contrast to the fact that I'm a stone carver, but I find with painting, I don't want to have all this stuff in my hands, even though this is not really much, and it's a smaller palette than most of them are even. I just don't want to do it. And I also find that my habit is, I take the brushes out and then I hold them here, and I'll say, well, this is a dark, and this is a light, and this is this, and so I'll just end up doing that, and then I'll grab one and do this, or I'll switch them all to this hand, and then I'll grab this one and paint like this. So I find that I really am more comfortable having my paints down. In my actual painting easels, I do have a ledge that comes out, whether I built it or whether it came with it. It'll always have a little table that is resting right in front of the painting, so I'm just right there. A lot of people don't like that because, for example, sight size is a method where you stand back about 2 meters from the painting, line up the painting with your model, do your drawing this way. It's sort of a cheater way to be fast with your drawing and make it more accurate in proportion. They find by the time you've walked up there, you don't want to be mixing paint up there and walk back and have to look again. So a lot of people like to mix it in the back when they see the paint, look at it, judge it, and all that. I find that doesn't work for me because often the distance where you're from, the light is very different there than it is up on your canvas, because normally your studio, you've got light on the model, you've got light on the canvas, but it's not necessarily going to be the same 6 feet away, because that would actually change it. It's going to be darker where you're standing from the distance evaluating. So there's no right or wrong answer for anything if you get the results that you want, and that's the most important thing. So learn what works for you and why you want to do it, and you can, well, if you have to justify it to anybody, you can, but you don't really have to justify things if you get the results that make you happy. So for right now, because I'm in this weird little setup here, I don't have the luxury of doing that. So I've got this little table that's off to the side here, and I'm going to start figuring stuff out. Now, about the approach to the painting. he's the star of the show, okay? Not really his lollipop. That's going to be the title of it, or at least it's the working title. But the figure is the star of the show. That said, everything I want to do to this painting is going to reinforce the subject matter of the little boy himself. So to that regard, I don't want to start with him at this point because I want his skin tone to be relative to the rest of the painting. And right now I don't have a rest of the painting. So I'm going to start out in the background, and I want to start out with the river water because first of all, the plants are overlapping the river, and also with my color sketches that I showed you earlier, if I can decide what the value of the river is, it makes it really easy for me to decide how light or how dark, how cold or how warm these foliage shapes that are coming in are front. Once I get the river done, I'll relate these gray rocks to that, and then we'll go to that. So, yeah. It's all about relationships, but at some point you've got to start somewhere. And if you started here, that would be fine. You'd be relating these to whatever it is you developed here. Or you might end up realizing that once you put in this stuff, that all of a sudden the figure doesn't look quite right. So because he's the most important thing, you would say, well, let me go back and change him now that I've got all this other information on. So we want to try to be efficient with the painting and also not have to redo more than is absolutely necessary. So, okay, so a wee bit about brushes. This is a prepared board, so it's got the white background is the Campitura, which means field color, and I started with a white because I want to have a bright painting. If I had painted it all dark, it would give me an overall dark, as you saw me do for the Castelvecchio. Good grief, I've got a Texas twang or something. I'm keeping it light. So start out light, and then I don't get dark, or at least I have a better chance to not get dark. So I'm going to start with these bristle brushes. I'll probably just pick one that I've scruffed up a bit or something. And I'm going to try to imitate the patterns of the line. Now, as far as the medium goes, this is my first layer of paint on the canvas. And because this canvas is actually wood, it's going to suck up the painting. Even though I've treated this a couple of times with the gesso vero, it's still going to suck it up. So right now, I don't need to worry about the fat over lean. I'm going to use the paint straight out of the tube. Then as I develop layers as we go along, then I'm going to be thinking about, I've got to have fat over lean, okay? So I hope that makes some sense. And yeah, let's get started. Okay, so when I look at my reference photo, I see that there's a white bit of light reflection on the water that's outside of the lollipop, okay, or around the lollipop. And I haven't made up my mind because, you know, this being in my bedroom, I tend to walk past it quite a bit often, looking through it because I tend to work up here when I'm comfortable. I don't know if I like this shape right here or if it really emphasizes the lollipop or if it's too much light against light. So right now I'm just going to leave this undetermined at this point. But what I see here is a nice light kind of warm green. It's warmer than it is cool. It's not super yellowy like these up here, but it's a nice warm green. Then I see strands of dark going through. Now again, this is water. And it's water in movement, so you're going to see a lot of this. Now, as you get down here where the rocks are, there are more things breaking up the pattern of the rocks. So you see more reflected light, like what's in here, okay? And really, if I wanted to study this, I think that this water is so transparent that what I'm seeing are the shapes of the stones that are underneath the water, which was lovely. This is in Pontremoli, Italy. I don't know what the name of the river is. It could be Pontremoli for all that I know. But I can see even from this printout, which a printout is not really as good as a photograph in some ways because it kind of absorbs a lot of the information. Unless you get a photographic paper, it sucks it in. On the other hand, a photograph can be way too contrasty. So, you know, but I kind of like painting from this because it stops me from being hyper realistic, which I'm not really that interested in. I don't find that appealing. I find that a wow on the technique, but emotionally I feel nothing for it in general. So I really want to do this so that I stay more with hoping to gather some of my recollection of painting with models in real life and try to see if I can get some of that in there. All right, Kels, quit talking and start painting. Okay, because I have a big canvas and I'm working with the background especially, I want to start with the largest brush that I have. Good grief, I can't speak. And I'll start with the mixed green here. Because this is background, I think this is actually too much high chroma. I feel like this is too much of a bright green. So let's see, right about his head here, it starts to be with a darkness in here. So let's put that in there. Okay, it doesn't look to me like water so much, but again, this is a river, not a sea, and so that means that a lot of, in this particular case especially, the water is surrounded by trees. And the river, as I mentioned before, this, good grief, I really can't speak as I'm painting, I'm sorry. The river is a clear water, and so it's reflecting a lot of its surroundings, and its surroundings happen to be green. So it makes this river at this time of day look green. Now, what you see me doing here is I'm going up to the leaf, but I want to make sure that I'm keeping soft edges. Do you see my strokey here is feelings, because water is horizontal. And so all of these shapes that you're going to see into the water here are going to be basically horizontal, or, you know, doing the little W shapes that we're so used to thinking of water. And I want to keep that atmosphere going. Right now I want to keep all the edges soft because, again, it's distance, so I'm not going to see everything clear cut. But also, for me, the soft edges gives me more dimension. It gives me more feeling of romance and happiness and silly things. Now, as I go in the distance, I'm going to put in some blue. Now, what you saw me do while I was speaking there that I didn't explain is that I was worried this is getting too dark, because I have to remember that my goal is to do a high-key painting, and that's not my normal thing. But also, I don't put tones down the right way the first time. I wish that I would, but I'm trying to work on it. But anyhow, so I'm going to add some of these greens and this colder color in here, because I also want to have a variety of things going on, and I'm curious is what it really amounts to. So again, I'm careful of this head, but again, his head doesn't have a straight line and a straight line and a straight line. This is me deciding the proportions of everything, and I don't need to stay married to it, because I drew this the first time. I have the ability to draw it again. I don't necessarily want to have the ability to draw it again, but I do have it, and I need to remember that I don't need to stay. You see the addition of white that I added there. And one of the problems is when I'm speaking to you, I'm not really looking, because normally I would be looking and studying. I'm not really sure at this point. I want to worry so much about adding in all the rocks and the clear water that I see. It could be that as I get paint on there, I can start to develop the understanding of that or not, depending on whether I feel like it's necessary to the artwork. Because again, I'm designing a painting, I'm not copying a photograph, okay? So I'm going to keep going on with this. You can see my brush strokes. Now, here you see that I'm getting a little bit where I don't totally want to lose the drawing, because, yeah, I can draw it again, but why should I? That's not being efficient, is it? So I know I don't need to stay married to this, but that's another reason. If I do soft edges, I don't need to worry so much about that sort of thing, because I'll get the pieces back. So when I color in these vertical little shapes up here and there, and of course I'm using too little paint. Do you see how I put that in there and it was just like nothing's going on? So I need to be refreshing my palette a little, my brushes a little more often. But I can do this vertical just to kind of color in this stuff. But in the end, I'm going to go back to get my strokes being horizontal, because I want the stroke to show the direction of the water more than I want it to be filling in a paint by number situation. Okay, I'm kind of enjoying how that's going, but I also want to remember to squint. When I squint, I see this green really is too dark. The nice thing is, if I want, I could take some spirits and get rid of some of that. But I think I'm just going to use the colors on the brush and also just kind of scrub things even thinner. I really like to say thin. I find that the transparency appeals to me, but also if you think about it, it's not the most ridiculous idea you've heard of, because I've just told you I'm doing a Campitura with white so that I can keep a light high cone painting. So I'm working with transparent paints for the most part, by choice, by per caso, whatever. But the point is that the white is going to come through with that at some point, because oil paint is transparent, and over time it gets lighter and lighter, lighter. So we're going to get this down. Now, one of my concerns is that my water is going to get too green so that my foliage isn't going to stick out. So right now I'm going to add in a little bit more blue up in here. Now, that's a strong blue, but I like it. It's fun. So I'm going to start adding in some of this to cool it down a bit, okay? And I can tell that that's too dark, but again, I'll make it thin. But I want to, again, make the color differentiation a little more strong here, because I want to have room enough to play with the foliage and make it dark, cold, warm, light. Good grief. Mixing up my adjectives and things. Okay, let's take a look at we are going. Yeah, I guess I still have some leaves there, and I kind of have a light space up in here, but that's an interesting point. If I want to leave some whites as very high reflective space, I really should think as a watercolorist person and get this going, so that I have that room. You don't want to, if something's going to stay white, it really is more efficient to leave it white, and that means, again, planning ahead, knowing what you want to do. So now these things, I can still see where those leaves are. I can actually see a wee bit of charcoal coming through, which is something, you know, bothers some people, it doesn't others. A lot of times the charcoal will mix with your oil paints, and you'll end up having a little bit of a dirty kind of color added into it. I find, for the most part, I'm not worried about that, because I tend to do the painting in layers, and I know that the first level of stuff, it's fine if the charcoal wants to mix in there and do its thing, because it's served me well, and you know, I'll be going over this stuff again. So I'm going to continue with this painting now, because you probably don't need to watch me do every stroke, do you? Or I don't know, do you want to? I'm not really sure about that sort of thing, but yeah. So let's see, let's keep this lollipop here. So I may want to clean this off. I'm diverging, because, so clean paper towel, wee bit of spirits dumped in where I clean my brush, and I say, no, just want to keep this white in case I decide later that I like the reference material being that way. So keep this. Okay, it doesn't have to be super white, because it's not going to be the star of the show. It's going to be a more subtle thing. If it is there, it's not going to be this big white thing sticking in. So, okay, and then I'll come back in and soften these edges a bit, because I like the bristle brush. You wouldn't use a sable at this point, because directly on the wood like this is really hard on your brushes. And for the basic scribbling in of things, which is really the way I look at it, the scribbling in is the part where you really, you're just rubbing this stuff up against a wood surface. What do you think that's going to go like? It's going to be probably one step lighter than rubbing it on sandpaper, but you're going to ruin your brushes pretty fast that way. It's not necessarily a bad thing to ruin your brushes for a painting that's going to be worth it. If you can sell the painting, you can certainly afford to buy the new brushes, right? But anyhow, it's a matter of what people feel like. Now, I'm already doing this differently from how I thought that I would do, because I was thinking Sorolla, I believe, was more like the Impressionist, where when you look at his works, you see a stroke this way and a stroke this way. And I realize that because I'm speaking to you, I have a hard time focusing on this and then this and really studying the model and saying, oh no, wait, this is more yellow here and this stroke is. And as I go back in the distance, the strokes are going to get tiny, smaller and smaller because they're further away. I don't see them, but also in perspective wise, they have to get smaller. Whereas these strokes up here in the foreground are going to be larger, and the waves will be a little bit bigger because they're closer to me. So all of those things are going on in my head. But as I said, it's difficult for me to do that because I'm trying to watch what I'm doing. I'm trying to look at the model. I'm trying to speak. And I find that it's very complicated for me to do all those things. And I pretty much admire people that can do a demo where they're conscious of all the things and maybe sometimes even looking at you, because when we communicate, we do look at eyes and hands, don't we? And that's a bit difficult to do when going on. So I'm going to end this for now and try to put in a little bit more background and start focusing on it. But I'll try not to go too far so that you can see how it's really getting developed, okay? Thank you for watching.